Good evening. It is Monday, January 29th, 2018. I'm Home Piggy Home. This is your Pig News Report. Background music tonight comes from Pink Floyd's 1988 show on August 20th at Nassau Coliseum, Uniondale, New York. It's a soundboard recording. Easiest spot to hear that was right at the beginning of A New Machine Part 2 right there, right when I came on. Tell this was, it's almost like listening to David, like to the monitor mix or something. So, away we go. Let's see what we've got. First off, we've got Trump congratulating the new Secretary of Health and Human Services.
An incredible. Alex will take the helm of a department he has already served with tremendous distinction. First as general counsel and later as deputy secretary. In both those roles, Alex was outstanding and an incredible public servant. People talk about him to this day. He was instrumental in improving the department's operations and advancing its emergency response capabilities. Alex knows inside and out the impact of government policy on patients, healthcare, and prices. As the former president of Lilly USA, big company, great company, and he did an incredible job. Alex brings invaluable private sector experience to complement his years of public service. The Department of Health and Human Services has already achieved a great deal rolling back regulations that drive up healthcare costs, but we have a long way to go. A lot of people are very happy with the amount we've done already, but Alex is going to bring that to a big, brand new level.
I, Alex Michael Azar II, do solemnly swear.
I, Alex Michael Azar II, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely,
Without any mental reservation.
without any mental reservation
Or purpose of evasion.
or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
Of the office upon which I am about to enter.
of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Public servant. People talk about him to this day.
See, that's important, guys. You listen to this, these oaths of office that these people take, and what do they? What's this? To me, the biggest thing that they promise to do in that is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and especially against those domestic enemies that are waging a war against the Republic with foreign enemies. Anyway, that stuff's important. It's important that we remember what it is these people take an oath to. Oh, let's listen to a little bit of, let's listen to David and I talk about 5G. We're gonna start focusing on 5G a little bit because, well, you know, I guess the feminists are going to be big on 5G because in all the studies, it's only male lab rats that develop heart and brain tumors. So we're not sure exactly what it's going to do to you. They're going to go ahead and run the experiment, though, and use you as the human test subject. So then later we'll know whether it's going to cause super rare cases of brain and heart tumors. Doesn't that sound lovely? Doesn't that sound awesome? It just sounds great. So let's listen to David and I talk about this a little bit. Part of the big problem with this, guys, is that we want to nationalize this communication grid. That's a terrible idea. We don't need the federal government taking over a communication grid. We need them to keep their hands out of it.
Let's talk about this 5G thing. This is something that just surfaced in the last 24 hours. We've been seeing the talk about a new infrastructure bill. It's going to be part of the State of the Union. It was originally talked about as being a $1 trillion bill that would have to have corporations involved in this because we're broke. You know, we're borrowing money from the Chinese for everything, and the Federal Reserve, and these globalists that you saw at Davos. They hold the purse strings. And we just keep pushing the debt through the Federal Reserve onto future generations. But there may not be any future generations as we continue to make people here in the West sicker and sicker with the toxins in our food, our drink, and the radiation that we're now planning to nationalize as part of this 5G network. This has a lot of different components to it. First of all, when they start talking about the federal government, this is a report that came from Axios last night. This is not, we'll see what happens with the White House tonight, but this is a long-term plan of the military-industrial complex and the deep state. This bridges multiple administrations. And the question is whether or not Trump will buy into this or not, whether or not he'll try to sell this to the American people. And will the American people, even though this is a deep state military-industrial complex agenda, a UN agenda, a globalist agenda, even though that's what it is, will the people who would normally take the safety off of their guns, will they just complicitly sit back and say, oh, Trump's got it, he's okay. If he says it's okay, I'll trust him. That's my concern. And so that's why I'm talking to you about this. Understand we're talking about several different things if this memo is correct. And I'll tell you what the memo, what Axios says the memo says. White House national security officials have put this out, part of the military-industrial complex. First of all, they want to nationalize an industry. Do you see a problem with that? I do. Next, they want to control our communications, and not just control our communications through infrastructure and a network, but control the content, and I'm going to show that to you as well. Then they want to implement a smart city population control, controlling what people do. But then, and we're going to focus on this first, there's the health issue. And I believe that that's another type of population control, as in soft kill. That's another aspect of this. And it's all going to be done without your consent, without any information, without any testing, proper testing of this, because we've already had, as I started to talk about with the LA Times article of a year and a half ago, we've already had some testing that looks very, very concerning about 5G technology. They said, of course, this is going to be essential for autonomous vehicles and for a spy grid. And they're saying we've got to have, this is how the military gets into it, we've got to have this to protect us against Chinese hackers. Yeah, okay. So we're going to, because we want to protect ourselves against communist authoritarians who don't have the best interests of Americans in heart, we're going to create a nationalized industry, communist, and we are going to turn it over to the people who want to control all of our communications. And we're not going to do this, and we don't really care what health effects or what economic effects or what political effects it has on the American people. Sounds like a great plan for security.
Yeah, can you sign us up?
A national toxicology program, researchers, and this was done in May of 2016, took a look at 5G. And what they did was they took rats and they exposed them to 9 hours of radiation a day. Now, they did this in 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off. 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off for 9 hours. Let me explain to you something.
Yours won't be turning off.
It's going to be far worse for you and I when we're the lab rats.
You're not going to be able to turn off the 5G towers everywhere
continuously,
and the repeaters.
Not for 9 hours a day, 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off. Okay?
24/7.
So that's really probably only 4.5 hours of exposure.
It'll
we're
have
going to be
peaks
getting
and
this
valleys.
24 hours a day.
You'll be exposed
7 days
to
a
it
week,
24/7.
365 days a year. And this is what they found. They found increased incidences of rare brain and heart tumors at about the federally allowable level of cell phone radiation for brain exposure. And here's the most interesting thing about this. The rare incidences of the rare types of brain and heart tumors that they were able to create in these rats by exposing them to 5G technology was only found in male rats. In male rats. You want to talk about spermageddon? This is Hollywood must be jumping with delight at the prospect of this. This is one way to get rid of toxic masculinity. 5G. You can make it toxic to be a male. The American Cancer Society said that this marked, quote, a paradigm shift in our understanding of radiation and cancer risks. They said, this is the worst we have ever seen in terms of cell phone radiation studies, this 5G stuff. So what is our proposal? Our proposal is to blanket the nation with 5G.
the health hazards, the testing pans out that it's worse than ever.
We can't.
Worse than ever. But what do they want to do? They want to put an entire grid of it across the entire nation. Why? To protect you from China. What about that makes any fucking sense? Nothing.
Wait, because we got to get this done by 2020 to 2030 timeframe. So we can't wait for private business to do this. They just aren't doing it quickly enough.
We need you to start dying faster, please.
Rollout. People might.
What's wrong with you people? Why won't you keel over quicker?
But when you start seeing epidemics of infertility and tumors in men, and everybody will be saying, gee, what's going on? This is awful. Maybe we should have some charity events to raise awareness.
Well, exactly. We'll just raise awareness for it.
But they won't.
We'll put on a wristband and we'll talk about it in an awards show, and the problem will be gone. Poof.
To allocate a large swath of airwaves for 5G. Those airwaves could become available to consumers by 2020.
Fucking Tinkerbell told me
they're
so.
Now talking about in this memo.
These people are insane.
And of course, the wonderful thing about
the insane part is when you watch the mass public start buying into the shit. Buying into their awareness campaigns. Go do something about it. Awareness campaigns. Me too. I was raped. Go file charges against people. Do something about it. Me too. It's terrible, but a Me Too movement doesn't do anything. You know what does stuff? Arrests and convictions. And then the public hearing about it. And then they keep going and they keep going, and you just round all these people up. That will change a culture. Do you actually want to change people's behavior? Or do we want to just keep putting on a damn charade?
This is that you can participate on Facebook and Twitter, and you can watch movies now 10 times faster than you can even with 4G. Entertaining ourselves to death. The FCC, back in 2016, under Obama, voted unanimously to allow wireless providers access to high-frequency airwaves. But here's the problem. They can't carry data very far. Because I said, remember, we have, and you've seen this with your phones, right? You got 3G, you got 4G, now you're going to have 5G. The G doesn't mean generation. It's not third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation, which I wasn't really following this that closely. That's kind of what I thought. No, that was actually the frequencies at which they work. 3G, 3 gigahertz. Or if you prefer Back to the Future's pronunciation, gigahertz, Marty. Anyway, the 3 gigahertz or 4G is 4 gigahertz. And when you get to 5G, what is it? It's not 5 gigahertz. It is 25 gigahertz. They make a big jump in frequency. It's 25, it's the mid-20s up to over 100 gigahertz. And the problem comes from that high frequency. By going to that high frequency, just as you think about your audio speakers, right? You've got the big bass woofers, and they don't have to be directional. You don't have to really worry about where you put those. But you got to aim the tweeters that are putting up high-frequency stuff. You got to aim those pretty carefully. And if you get away from the tweeter and you're not in line with that, you don't hear the high frequency as much. Well, same thing is happening with the...
That's why guitarists always play so damn loud. Have you ever wondered that, if you're not a guitar player, why guitar players play so damn loud? It's because they usually have their amps aimed at the back of their legs, and they don't have any ears down there, so they can't hear the highs. They can't hear when they're picking the strings, and they can't tell what they're doing. So they just keep turning the shit up instead of getting an amp stand or leaning it against the wall or putting it in a monitor or something.
These microwave things, it becomes more and more directional as the frequency increases. And so what they're going to have to do is they're going to have repeaters everywhere. And right now, it may be a priority for you, as it is for my family. If we're looking for a home, we want to make sure that we don't build a home underneath electrical power lines. And we want to make sure that we don't build our home right next to a cell phone tower. Because, you know, the radiation decreases with a square of the distance. There'll be all up and down the street, these poles for you of these. They're going to be about the size of a smoke detector. And they point out that by the end of last year, there was 300,000 308,000 wireless antennas on cell phone towers and buildings last year, and that would have been 2015. That was double the number that they were in 2002. It is going to go up exponentially with 5G service. They're going to have a station needed for every 12 homes. And they're going to put them in rural areas. You think you're going to be able to get away by moving out to the country? No, 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 no. They want to their Smart Cities initiative. The United your smart appliances or your autonomous automobiles. But no, the IoT, those things are going to be rare tumors for the brain and the heart, as they saw in their initial test.
Doesn't that sound nice?
They shut that thing down and kind of kept that quiet. Came out
the
about
Internet
a year
of
and a half
what?
ago.
The Internet
But
of rare tumors.
in males.
Oh, lovely.
Interestingly enough. But let's just rush on with this and let's roll out a national initiative here. We're going to nationalize our communications infrastructure.
There's the problem.
I'm opposed to that in principle.
There's
Talk
one of the
about
big
the
problems.
political aspects of this. But let's get back to this report from Axios. They say Trump national security officials are considering an unprecedented federal takeover of a portion of the nation's mobile network in order to guard against China. Now, these are the same people who turned over our economy, our manufacturing base to China. How did they do that? Well, they took somebody like Richard Nixon, the most stridently anti-communist politician they could find, and they used him as a beard. Because, if they had come up with a program to turn over our economy to China, and it was being sold by some kind of a lefty socialist, the people on the right would have said, wait a minute, we're not going to do that. But they all just laid down and said, no, I'm sure this is okay. Richard Nixon doesn't like communism, so he's going to be looking out for our interests, and you don't fall into that same trap.
See, that's how they do. That's how the deep state plays. That's how they play these presidents, and they play on their they play on their political positions and their personal outlook on the world. We went over this with Operation Ajax in Iran, and the way the CIA played on Eisenhower's fear of communists so much. They used it against him. This time he's saying that they use Richard Nixon's fear of communists against the American people to get you to be naive about it, to get you to just not worry about it. They just trick you into what he's doing. They control him. He's a puppet.
This time. Don't let this happen because you think that President Trump is looking out for your interests. Whether he knows this or not, you need to make yourself aware about this, and you need to pick up the phone and start calling people on Capitol Hill. People ask me, well, what do I do? Well, pick up the phone and complain about it. Tell your neighbor, tell your congressman. In case your congressman doesn't care, tell your neighbor. You get enough people to call these baboons. That's what a group of baboons is called. It's called a Congress. You call these baboons, your local baboon and the other baboons, and you start laying into them about the fact that you don't, and you can pick whatever you want, because we've got something here that is about controlling you and controlling the population, your movement, your speech, and so forth. It's about soft kill. It's about population control. It's got health issues. It's going to control our content. It's going to nationalize an industry. So pick something.
Right, exactly. Pick which angle bothers you the most and call them about it. Pick up the phone
and give them a call about each and every one of those.
Exactly, and then pick it up and call them about the next reason it sucks.
Because I disagree with the idea that the federal government should roll out a 5G network, because I disagree with nationalizing industries and having them under the control of the central government. Next call. I disagree with this, and I'm calling today because I don't want the FCC controlling our content and our access to communications from the central government.
That's exactly right, David Knight. That's exactly how this should go. Hi, I'm calling about 5G, and it sucks for this reason. Next call. I'm calling about 5G, and it sucks for this reason. Boom, boom, boom. This is what you pick up the phone. You call people. You say, hey, what's up with that memo? Let's get moving. We want to know what's going on. Hey, what are you doing about 5G? We don't like this. Screw off. Get rid of that. The Congress people that actually listen to their constituents, hopefully your district is one of those, but pick up the phones and make the phone call. Do you have a minute and a half? Can you find 3 minutes? Can you find 5 minutes? You make a couple phone calls. They got people ready to answer the phones. We're paying them, for God's sake. We're paying the fucking people. Pick up the phone and call them.
Next call, so forth. You understand what I'm saying here? We've got our hands on...
And I don't mean we're paying the Congress people. That's a whole other issue. We're paying a whole bunch of people to answer the motherfucking phone. So pick it up and give them a call.
On a PowerPoint deck and a memo, said Axios. Both of these have been produced by a senior National Security Council official, and they were presented recently to senior officials at other agencies in the Trump administration. And what I'm saying is that before they buy into this and publicly make a statement and then get themselves into a position where they would have to back down and walk it back, and they're not going to likely do that because it would be embarrassing for them politically to say, you know what, I really didn't look at the issues here, yada, yada, yada. Get involved now. It's like getting involved in the primaries before you don't have a good choice. Before these guys lay down this course of action and then say, well, I've put my reputation on the line. I'm not going to back out. I don't really care. We'll kind of address it some other way down the road or something. Tell them you don't want this and go down the list of issues. I'm going to go into the rest of these issues when we come back. Welcome back. We're going to be joined in the next hour by a lawyer for the Hammonds, the people. They said, no, we don't want to have a conflict here. They peacefully went to prison, but it doesn't mean for the national media saying, look at these terrorists taking this over.
You guys can go watch the rest of that if you want to. The 5G stuff is important, though. It's important that we at least are informed about it and have more transparency, maybe a little more testing, and start finding out what some of these things to do. Because, you know, we know that humans don't do well against radio. What is this? Like, they're like, well, damn it, we can't set off we can't get Trump to get in a nuclear war. We haven't started World War III. How else can we kill these people with radiation? Got it. 5G. There we go. We'll just crank up the gigahertz to 25 to 100 gigahertz and just kill them slowly with radiation. Pick up the phone, call your Congress people, and tell them you would prefer to not be killed slowly with radiation from the 5G network. All right, let's get going on what we got. People talking. There you go. So we got Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe has finally stepped aside from the FBI. Andrew McCabe, this is the guy that was trying to wait out for retirement. He was eligible for a pension this year. I'm hoping this means he's not getting his full pension. The guy shouldn't be getting a pension, and he needs to be facing charges is what he needs to do. But at least we got step one is we're removing bad actors from the deep state. Okay, this is a glorious thing. So, exactly, for Andrew McCabe to resign ahead of schedule on the day that the House Intelligence Committee is discussing and voted, by the way, to release the memo, which is now in Trump's hands and has 5 days. The day before President Trump's State of the Union means this is going to be a great 2018. So we're lifting it back up from the somber 5G report here, back to hopefully some good news. Oh, and then you got this idiot known as James Comey. Special Agent Andrew McCabe stood tall over the last 8 months when small people were trying to tear down an institution we all depend on. He served with distinction for 2 decades. I wish Andy well. I also wish continued strength for the rest of the FBI. America needs you. What is this? Is he a tallest? Is that what Comey is? Have you seen this? You've seen the man, right? He's like 8'9" or something. I don't know how tall he is. He's really tall. He's just, it doesn't seem very inclusive for people of a shorter stature here. Anyway, he seems to have some dissenting opinions towards shorter people. You know, these people, though. Remove Trump now. Remove Trump now. Look at all these idiots. Oh, look. Yeah, they buried mine. They buried mine. I just, where'd mine go? Let's see. Anyway. I just simply asked him why. Why did you attempt to tear down such a necessary institution, Mr. Comey, you know? Why did you do that? It's good. McCabe, I'm going to jail because Hillary didn't go to Wisconsin. That's pretty straight to the point. And, you know, you're actually going to be going to jail for many other reasons. But yes, this would be the way they think. See, is like, well, because we weren't allowed to keep our crimes covered up. It's their fault. These people exposing our crimes are the problem. Yes, the people exposing the corruption are the problem. The whistleblowers, these people they're the problem. Well, the problem is because all of our national intelligence secrets are going to be known. You know, if you crooks just did your jobs properly, then this crap wouldn't happen, would it? Yeah, so hopefully Comey will go. Now, Comey was leaking all kinds of classified information out, so these people, they need to be tried. And, yeah, we got people talking about, you know, how Hillary stole the show. So all kinds of jokes on Twitter that, you know, it's not the first thing she stole, or like she stole the DNC nomination from Bernie. Exactly. The fact that they keep walking this almost corpse out in front of everybody, and she just thoroughly enjoys embarrassing herself continually and just won't go away, it's not even laughable anymore. It's just become pathetic. It was funny for a while. You're just like, this is amusing. You know, keep at it. Now it has just become pathetic. You gotta like this. How do we make that bigger? Can we do it this way? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So we got a new tax form here. We got a box here. Are you single, married? Here's one. Trump is not your president. Check here if you wish to pay taxes at Obama administration rates. Good deal, guys. Who knows? That's probably old. I hadn't seen it. I don't hang out on Twitter all the time. I hang out on there now to find news. But I don't hang out on there to socialize. Or to read leftist propaganda. Trolling leftist propaganda, though, that is an approved of Twitter activity. So the other thing we have here is an article about Rod Rosenstein. So, turns out Rosenstein actually renewed the FISA spy warrant against Carter Page, who was a former Trump campaign advisor. And according to this 4-page memo that's going to be released to us, that's exactly what we're going to hear. Is that not only did he sign off, and he actually went and renewed this. The memo, which was compiled by Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee, states that Rosenstein signed off on a renewal for a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrant against Carter Page, who is featured prominently in the unverified Steele dossier, created by basically Christopher Steele, if there's an British intelligence agent. Anyway, so this should be fun as we get this information out. Hey, you got Soros gave us example at Davos of exactly what video I put out Saturday, I think. Was it Saturday? I think it was Saturday. Maybe it was Sunday, one of the two. The Soros Nazi 60 Minutes interview. And exactly what he's explained that he's been doing for decades. He just like all these people, he plays both sides. He's causing the chaos you see on both sides usually. But so, you know, here's an example where, you know, he does this with governments. He like invests in them and then bets against them and pulls out and like crashes markets and manipulates shit. That's what he does. Then tries to go in and tell you how you could have better equipped yourself to not be manipulated by him. What a crook. So, but here what he's doing is he's going and telling that he made all these statements about social media and how it's such a problem and it's addictive, and they sell basically an addictive service, and it's similar to casino gambling, and he goes on. And this is a guy that heavily is invested in Google and Facebook. So anyway, you just constantly playing both sides. Rides things, makes billions off stuff, crashes crap, sabotages people, companies, nations. You talk about a guy that needs to be tried for some crimes. There he is, right there. He's a long list of people that need to be brought to justice. Their crimes go against like entire populations of humanity. We're not talking about just a crime against another person, and we take those so seriously. And somehow when individual people make crimes against masses of people, unless they're just outright murdering them, we let them get away with it. You know, let them murder 6 to 20 million people, and then people get outraged about it. Why do we have to wait until they start murdering millions of people? Until people are outraged about these people's actions and their activities. As we're passing this Q tab, let's just make sure Q didn't drop anything in the last couple hours. Q has dropped in the last couple hours. So we have this here, which dropped 14 minutes ago. Narrative shift, nation on alert. Firing Rod Rosenstein equals block Mueller. Firing Rod Rosenstein equals setup to firing Mueller. Firing Rod Rosenstein equals red line. What was the Senate confirmation vote regarding Rod Rosenstein? Let's go look. Let's go look. Let's look. There we go. Well, what do we have? $94-6. So we have Booker from New Jersey as a nay. Blumenthal, Booker, Gillibrand, Warren, Harris. So we have all Democrats on nays there. Interesting. Okay, so it was overwhelming, but we had some nays. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, why did Rosenstein beg Ryan to block the FISA memo from congressional review or further advancement? Times 7 congressional members plus 3 senators plus 2 former Obama senior officials plus 4 outside contractors. OC top sensitive level clearance, sensitive level clearance at SCIF DC. Top security clearance is mandatory for admission. How is that possible? We see you. DC Capitol, top security, let's see. Oh. Anyway, yeah, I think this meeting, I think he's getting into some of these, this secure room where this memo and the people that have read it. And I know Rosenstein was supposed to go, I think that I had heard it was supposed to be available for him to read this weekend, and there was no comment from, I believe, the Intel Committee or the FBI about whether that happened. At least that's the last I saw earlier this evening. But it was rumored that it was made available to him. And I don't think it even said it was rumored that he went to see it, but it was rumored that it was made available for Rosenstein to see. The FBI was basically, and I think we got an article over here. I think this Zero Hedge article, the Zero Hedge article, I believe, goes into this. It talks about important details being left out. I thought, let's see. I thought maybe this said that he was. The memo spotlights Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's role in approving the warrant application, according to the New York Times. Rosenstein appointed Mueller and has become a recent target on the right, as well as reportedly garnering the frustration of the president. According to The Hill, it's unclear how much input the Department of Justice will have prior to the publication of the memo. Typically, when sensitive documents are declassified, the agencies with equities in the intelligence weigh in to assess whether its release would damage national security. But the committee initially stonewalled the Department of Justice from viewing the document because, as one committee member put it last week, they're the ones that have the problem. That's exactly right. It's like, this is the same argument as like, how in the hell Robert Mueller can conduct an investigation on Russia collusion when the man is centered around Russian collusion investigations revolving Uranium One and everything else. This is the man that has ties to Russia. Like, how the hell he can even be heading... Oh, they just parade stuff in front of your face that is so blatantly a lie or just an absolute slap in your face. It ought to make you angry. It ought to make you angry. They are brazen about this stuff. It's like they're like rubbing your nose in a... It's like, it'd be like rubbing your dog's nose in his own shit or something. I don't know what it's like. It's unbecoming of politicians, that's for sure. It is a very unbecoming behavior of politicians. So I thought this talked about that there was some... but anyway, they basically said that they're not going to give them... they basically said they're not going to let the Department of Justice... They're the ones that have the problem. So Secretary Raj Shah hinted on CNN that the Department of Justice would also not have an opportunity to review the document during the White House pre-release review. That was the 5-day period I referenced earlier. The Department of Justice doesn't have a role in this process, he told CNN. So FBI Director Christopher Wray was reportedly allowed to view the document in the committee's... I'm sorry, it was Wray, not Rosenstein. It's Christopher Wray that was reportedly allowed to review the document in the committee's secure spaces over the weekend. A committee spokesperson declined to comment on Monday, as did the FBI. Okay, so it wasn't Rosenstein. There we go. So we can go back. Awesome. So we got this picture of freedom. I wonder if it... Should we do something with it? Let's see. Let's see what happens with it. Oh, it was right there. I was already sorted by data. Well, I don't know if this thing does anything. I'm not good enough with graphics. If it does, we can find out. Somebody's probably done something with it. Another one from Q. Here you go. James Comey tweet translation. Special Agent Andrew McCabe stood tall over the last 8 months. Do not talk. When small people, sheep, were trying to tear down an institution we all depend on, cover. He served with distinction for 2 decades. We own you and your family. I wish Andy well. 187. I also wish continued strength for the rest of the FBI. General threat to others. America needs you. Activate sleeper cells. Interesting. So Q's telling us this is what James Comey's text meant. I kind of thought it was interesting that James Comey's just popping his fucking head out of the woodwork with all the shit that he's got coming his way. Or ought to have coming his way. And he decides to pop out today with his stupid-ass tweet. Being all condescending towards small people. Interesting. Well, so we've got new Q dumps. We'll keep an eye out. We're going to move on, though. We've got this story out of the San Diego Union Tribune. We've got a couple DACA recipients that have been arrested on suspicion of human smuggling. All these dreamer kids are they're Harvard attendees and graduates, and they're the most upstanding citizens in the country. In case you forgot the talking points on these people, we'll remind you there. So you got to keep that in mind while you're reading this article. This article is obviously just a slanderous attempt at fake news. I think is what the left wants you to believe. You can go read it yourself, but yeah, 3 men were inside. The driver, 20-year-old DACA recipient whose status had expired, and 2 Mexican nationals, ages 21 and 22, suspected of being in the country illegally. Federal officials said the driver and his cousin, the 22-year-old passenger, told agents they had been involved in human smuggling in the area. The driver is currently in federal custody. Well, good thing it was a federal agent, because, if it wasn't, this could have been ugly if it was, somebody under the jurisdiction of the state of California, because I think they're going to go sue people if they would have been the ones to say, hey, this guy claims he's involved in a human smuggling operation, illegally bringing people into the country. Here, Border Patrol or federal authorities, you should do something about this. They want to go punish them for that. So it's a good thing that the federal agents took care of it, so we don't have to have this constitutional nightmare that these sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, pseudo-nations, want to start doing when it comes to federal immigration policy. See, so you've got this out of Zero Hedge. We've got U.S. and Turkish troops headed for a military showdown in Syria. So you've got a group of Erdogan's troops that are heading for Manbij here. Maybe blow this one up just a little bit. We got some maps and stuff. So they're heading for here. Let's go. Let me turn on the old highlight tool. Maybe it'll help. Yeah, you do that. You restart. There we go. So they're heading for right here. Anyway, so this is the area controlled by Assad and the Syrian government. This is the area with Syrian Kurdish forces, and we're supplying weapons to Kurdish forces fighting these areas here and here against the Islamic State group. Okay, we're fighting ISIS there and giving weapons, and so we've got military presence here, and we've said we're not moving. So 2 days after we reported, Zero Hedge reported that Turkey valiantly demanded that U.S. forces vacate military bases in the Syrian district of Manbij, when Turkey's foreign minister, whoever, some crazy name that's pronounced like this, according to Google.
Millet Cavusoglu.
There you go, Millet Cavusoglu, also said that Ankara is calling upon the U.S. to cease any and all support to Syrian Kurdish forces and militias. Not surprisingly, the U.S. refused, and on Monday, a top American general said that U.S. troops will not pull out from the northern Syrian city of Manbij, rebuffing Ankara demands to withdraw from the city and risking a potential confrontation between the two NATO allies, which would be a first, NATO allies coming to blows. So this is kind of going to put a stop to their little march in. So it says last week they pushed into Syria to drive U.S.-backed Kurds out of Afrin. Here. They said this thing is grotesquely codenamed Operation Olive Branch. President Erdogan warned that the offensive could soon target terrorists in Manbij, some 100 kilometers east of Afrin. This is Erdogan here. With the Olive Branch operation, we have once again thwarted the game of those sneaky forces whose interests in the region are different, Erdogan said in a speech to provincial leaders in Ankara last week. Starting in Manbij, we will continue to thwart their game. But not if the U.S. is still there, unless for the first time in history we're about to witness war between two NATO members. And the U.S. has no intention of moving. Colonel Ryan Dillon, spokesperson for the U.S.-led coalition, told Kurdish media on Sunday that American forces would continue to support their Kurdish allies despite Erdogan's threats. Turkey knows where our forces are in Manbij and what they're doing there and why they're there to prevent any kind of escalation between the groups who are in that area, Dillon told Ruda TV. The coalition will continue to support our Syrian democratic forces in the fight against ISIS. We have said this all along, and we have said this with the Kurdish elements of the SDF. We will provide them equipment as necessary to defeat ISIS. However, in an apparent miscommunication, U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster said a day earlier that the United States would no longer provide weapons to YPG fighters or the Democratic Union Party, PYD, keeping these all straight, YPG, PYD, sending mixed messages about Washington's relationship with the Kurds. Yeah, the easier way to understand it is we got, General, or Colonel Ryan Dillon, saying that we got a general saying we're not going anywhere. We got a colonel saying that we are still supplying the weapons as needed for them to fight ISIS and for the Kurds to fight ISIS. And then you got Erdogan saying, get the hell out of the way, here we come. So you got Turkey has no intention of backing down, and if anything, will keep pressing and assuring an armed confrontation with the U.S. is inevitable. A huge story is developing right now, namely that a big Turkish army convoy, including APCs, drove through HTS-controlled Idlib in Syria, heading towards Alice. I don't know how to pronounce all these places. A rebel-controlled front line with Syrian government forces and allies. Turkish army convoy was escorted the whole time by Al-Qaeda-linked HTS group. And she claims that Russia's bombing the road, basically, or like two right here. This is worth paying attention to, according to multiple opposition activists on the ground who are tracking the Turkish army convoy. The Russians are bombing a village 2 kilometers in front of the convoy. As a result, the Turkish convoy has come to a halt. So here you have U.S. forces saying they're not going to leave this region that they're heading towards. You have them heading towards it, being led by an Al-Qaeda group, an Al-Qaeda-led group, and then you have Russia coming in and bombing. Right, here's the Russian bombing location. Here's where this Turkish group is moving right here, and the Russian bombing right here in front of them. And this is their intended destination right here. So Russia just bombs right between where they're trying to go and where they are. Anyway, something to keep an eye on. See if this... Anyway, I think it's a lot of the point on that was just showing how long the thing was. Or this one.
الجيش التركي بالكفر الجنوبي باتجاه ريف حلب الجنوبي. وقفوا رجعوا هي همر هي لسه وقفنا هناك صاري زيورك تبعنا صاري زيورك بالكامل دومالوس صاري زيورك تبعك عم تصور.
So, yeah, anyway, it says right here, seems for now the Russians are not going to allow the Turkish army convoy to pass. I'm hearing from one source on the ground that the convoy will go back in the direction of Turkey. I'm in touch with sources on the ground in Idlib and will update as news develops. Due to nearby Russian bombing and Syrian shelling, witnesses on the ground now say that the Turkish military convoy has basically turned off its lights and is waiting in the area. We're trying to find out if they will turn back or continue advancing despite warnings. Will Erdogan be crazy enough to start a regional battle against both the U.S. and Russia at the same time on Syrian soil? Or will Russia flip and side with Turkey in its defensive, offensive? Yet as it careens to a military confrontation with U.S. troops, we expect to find out in the immediate future. So yeah, this will be interesting to see how Russia plays this. Like, there's a big chance for the U.S. and Russia to like be on the same side in something here and have common cause. And I don't know. I don't know. Would they be colluding together then, though? Would Mueller come out and say that proves his case? I mean, that's what these people were claiming, you know, from the whole damn election on, is if there's any chance at all that you agree with something that a Russian or the Russian government agrees with or any of that, well, hell, you're as guilty as being a Russian, apparently, and you're colluding with them. Forget that you potentially might have common interests on some fronts. So, yeah, so apparently Nikki Haley, our ambassador to the UN, thinks that Hillary's cameo ruined the Grammys. Well, I'm sorry, Nikki Haley. That is untrue. That is completely untrue. Terrible music ruined the Grammys. Hillary just made it worse, okay? But terrible music killed and ruined the Grammys. Here are your winners. Well, we got Bruno Mars, and we got we got some other thing here with Bruno Mars, and you know, anyway, a bunch of other stuff, and best dance, and oh, there's a rock. They have a best rock performance that went to Leonard Cohen. We got a best metal performance. We got a best rock song. Foo Fighters won a songwriting award. And let's see, anyway, you know, you got one or two, and you just got a whole bunch of crap. That's what ruined the Grammys. That's why they had their lowest ratings ever. Less than 20 million people watched the Grammys. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about crappy music. Wow. Who has time for crappy music? See what Mark Dice has to say.
No amount of ibuprofen could alleviate the headache that I got from
guys,
watching
if
the
you
Grammys
hopefully
last
like
night.
Mark Dice,
I really took one
you gotta
for the
go
team,
support
you
him.
guys.
He's got lots of good
Watching
stuff.
this
He's
for
got
the
hilarious
2.5
shirts.
years.
He's got
sitting through
good
3.5
books.
hours of this pop culture poison and
but lots
holding
of
on
great
to your sanity.
T-shirts.
It's not easy, let me
And
tell you. It was hosted by this clown
and
who has a late night talk
just
show
damn
on one
funny.
of the big three networks that thankfully I haven't made the mistake of ever clicking onto. And he started the show promising the audience that it was going to be the most diverse Grammys ever. Diversity being a code word for less white people. Then he apologized for his whiteness and expressed guilt for having blonde hair and blue eyes.
This year, we don't just have the most diverse group of nominees in Grammys history, we also have, for the second year in a row, the least diverse host in Grammys history. And now here, performing with Mark Ronson, please welcome...
Oh no, a white male host 2 years in a row. Shame on you, Grammys. Next year, you better have a black lesbian to fix this mistake. Then Kendrick Lamar, a rapper from Compton,
Yeah,
came
they
out
just
and
they just don't
performed
get it.
with
They
his
just
dancers dressed up as militarized police while an American flag waved behind them. I couldn't understand what he was saying because I don't speak Ebonics, but thankfully Dave Chappelle was there to translate things for us after he was done.
I just wanted to remind the audience that the only thing more frightening than watching a black man be honest in America is being an honest black man in America. Sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
Thank you, Dave. I kind of suspected from the imagery that it was an anti-cop, pro-Black Lives Matter performance. And you're right, it is dangerous for a black man to speak the truth in America today. Just ask any black conservative, like Pastor Darrell Scott, talk show host Larry Elder, Sheriff David Clark, Ben Carson, or any others. Then there was a performance by this...
Anyway, you guys go watch the rest of that. Go check out Mark Dice's channel. So, we're going to watch a little bit of Congress.
Bill that would deals with the 20-week abortion bill that passed in the U.S. House. They failed to move forward in the Senate, needing 60 votes to do that. They did, however, advance the nomination of David Strauss to be a judge on the 8th Circuit. Vote there 57 to 41. Back on the House side, the Intelligence Committee meeting today. The New York Times reporting that Republicans on the committee apparently disregarding Justice Department warnings.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2017, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Gates, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I come to the House this evening with several of my colleagues, principally to thank Judiciary Chairman Bob Goodlatte, Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy, Intelligence Chairman Devin Nunes for their tireless pursuit of the truth. There is a 4-page memo I've read it. Over 190 of my Republican colleagues have read it. Some Democrats have read it. Some have boycotted reading it. And it details circumstances that are deeply troubling to me and that I believe will be deeply troubling to many Americans. But this memo encapsulates an entire year of work by these committees, by these committee chairmen, and they are to be commended for the excellent job that they have done, for the professionalism that they've undertaken, and for the stunning facts that they've uncovered that will soon be available for the American people. I'll have more to say on this throughout the hour, Mr. Speaker, but first I'd like to recognize one of my colleagues in the Congress who was one of the first and loudest voices calling for transparency at the highest levels and to the maximum extent possible. I would yield such time as he may consume to Mr. Zeldin of New York.
Well, thank you to Mr. Gates for organizing this important special order. And to all my colleagues who are coming to the House floor tonight, encouraging the President of the United States now to certify the release of this memo to the American public. The American public is a lot smarter than a whole lot of other people give them credit for. Present them with the facts, the truth, and they can form their own independent judgment as to what transpired. That was the first thought that came to my mind when I went to the basement the week before last, the basement of the House Capitol, to read this classified memo of the House Intel Committee, that this memo should be immediately released to the American public so that they have all of the facts. In addition to releasing the memo, I believe it's important to be releasing relevant material sourced in the memo. Now, tonight, the House Intel Committee voted to publicly release this memo to the American public, and at the same time, the House Democrats came to the committee calling for the declassification and public release of their memo. Now, let me add a little bit more context on this memo that the House Democrats came to the floor asking to be released. They did not allow the voting members of the House Intel Committee to read the memo tonight before voting to declassify and publicly release it. Let me repeat that. The House Democrats, led by Ranking Member Adam Schiff, went to the House Intel Committee tonight calling for the public release of their memo.
Adam Schiff for brains.
Asking for their colleagues to declassify the memo and publicly release it immediately without giving them the opportunity to read it first. I can speak for myself. I haven't read the memo that the House Democrats offered up tonight. I haven't been granted any access to read it. I'm not aware of any other of my colleagues who have been able to read it. I can't even confirm it exists. Now, after the committee meets, it's fascinating to watch the minority members of the House Intel Committee going straight to the cameras, from the hearing room to the cameras, to give their narrative.
This is like exactly what they want to do tomorrow. There's this bombshell news and important information that the American public's going to learn and get to absorb. And they want, it's like, well, we want our turn. We want to come, we want to get, if you're going to get real news, don't we get a turn to give you fake news? And then Trump's going to do a State of the Union, and then you got like a CNN State of the Union led by Maxine Waters or some horse crap going to happen. I mean, give me a break. They're like, what? Are people that rely on our propaganda, what are they going to think? What a joke.
At no point did they mention whatsoever when they were saying that they were outraged that the majority members of that committee didn't vote to publicly release it. At no point did they mention that they never gave them the opportunity to read it first. Now, what you don't see at the same time are the majority members of the House Intel Committee racing off to all of those same cameras to give their side of the narrative, the members of that House Intel Committee. What we're asking for is for the American public to get the facts so that they could form the judgment for themselves of this FISA abuse. I, too, applaud the leadership of Mr. Nunes and the House Intel Committee for their work to restore faith with the American people. As a former Army intelligence officer and JAG officer myself, I understand the importance of giving our intelligence agencies the critical tools they need to protect our homeland, assist our troops on the front lines, and surveil our enemies. However, it's critical that we strike a balance between national security and civil liberty to prevent any gross violation of individual liberties under the guise of national security. Congress has the responsibility of ensuring an appropriate balance is struck. And when it is not, the release of information we feel is in the national interest and of public importance must get out. And today, Congress took an important step in making this possible. Americans deserve the truth. To pull the wool over the eyes of the American public insults their intelligence and debases the freedoms and liberties on which our nation was founded. Government transparency and accountability should be neither partisan or divisive. I would urge my colleagues on either side of the aisle, including those who have especially those who would have voted against its release, to evaluate, to reflect upon their position, and come together united in favor of my belief, of our belief, that the American public is a lot smarter than many others give them credit for. Give them the facts, and we have faith that they will be able to form their own independent conclusions. Now it's up to you, Mr. President. I would encourage you to release the memo. I would also encourage you to release relevant materials sourced in it. Americans have the right to know, and if we as their elected representatives fail to stand up for them, who will? The only way forward is to give the American public more information, not less. Release the memo. And thank you again to Congressman Matt Gaetz for your leadership throughout this entire process and your efforts to making sure that the American public learns more, not less.
I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding back. And I thank him for his persuasive leadership. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Zeldin, was one of the first to sign letters to members of the Intelligence Committee, and particularly its chairman, expressing the sense of this body that we supported the transparency that the gentleman spoke of. And Mr. Speaker, now I would yield such time as he may consume to the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lamborn.
I thank the gentleman from Florida for yielding time. I also thank him for his leadership on this issue and for putting this hour together. Mr. Speaker, I have reviewed the secret memo in a secure setting, and after having reviewed the contents of the classified memo relating to FISA abuses, I support its full release to the public. Americans deserve the truth, and Congress should always strive for transparency. I'm stunned at the previous administration's underhanded surveillance methods and misuse of power at the highest levels of the FBI and Department of Justice. This should never have been permitted to happen. Moreover, all federal agencies, including the FBI, should be held to a high standard and always be held accountable for their actions. The issues that the memo raises must be brought to light and dealt with responsibly. So I'm pleased that the House Intelligence Committee voted tonight to release the memo, but our work does not end there. We must continually strive for integrity and openness within all levels of government. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. Mr. Speaker, I would next like to yield such time as he may consume to my colleague who serves on the Judiciary Committee, who's worked very hard from the very beginning to ascertain the bases of claims that have been made, a true investigator at heart, the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend from Florida for leading tonight's special order. It's been an eye-opening year in office for me, and it's an honor to serve with Representative Gaetz on the Judiciary Committee in the pursuit of justice. And exactly 11 nights ago, Mr. Speaker, I walked into a secure vault and signed one of the most detailed non-disclosure documents I've ever seen and viewed the memo. Everything I read was what I expected to read. That is what is outrageous to me. There was not much that I did not expect to find. And so I thank Chairman Goodlatte, Chairman Gowdy, Chairman Nunes, and members of the House Intelligence Committee who have now voted to present that memo to the public. I am looking forward to President Trump shortly declassifying permanently that memo. I've heard people say to me, you are eroding trust in government and in the finest law enforcement agency in the country, the FBI, with your continual attacks. But they don't understand. We're not attacking the FBI. We are seeking clarity, transparency, and understanding of what went on under the leadership of the Department of Justice and the FBI in the previous administration.
And then we'll attack individual people.
To not reveal that to the public
criminal behavior
is what erodes trust
not the whole
in their
bureau.
government.
Unless it's that
Nothing
bad.
in this memo will impair our national security. But if we are to withhold this memo from the American people, I believe that instead that would harm our national security because it would harm the integrity of those agencies, and it would further erode the trust that Americans have in their government. The American people deserve to see the information that I have read, that Mr. Gates has read, and that over 100 members of Congress have read. The leadership of Chairman Devin Nunes has made a tremendous difference, and this truth will be exposed, and I congratulate them. Mr. Speaker, this memo will provide clarity and understanding. This is the memo when it gets out, where the American people will say, we need to make changes. We have got to have people in these law enforcement agencies that lead these agencies and these bodies be trustworthy, who will follow the law, who will not abuse their power for political gain or purpose. Mr. Speaker, I trust my constituents. And frankly, in the last week, I met with literally hundreds of my constituents. The most common talked about theme was, when will that classified memo be released so I can read it, so I can make a determination, so I can understand what has been going on in our government.
You know why?
I am
because
so
people picked up phones and they called
the
these
House
people.
Intelligence Committee voted
They communicated with them and told them they wanted to read the memo. They can read Twitter.
That question
they can
is,
see
in
hashtags.
short order,
They're smart enough to
you'll
know
be
that
able
you're
to
not a
read this
Russian bot.
and make up your own mind.
Even though Russian bots are cool and they rule.
That is why I encourage President Trump to quickly declassify the memo. Again, I thank my colleague.
I want to be clear. I fully endorse
Representative
Russian
Gates
bots. Russian
and
bots.
all
Russian
who
bots
have been
are awesome.
working on this issue.
But I'm not one.
To make this open,
I wish
this
I
memo
was.
open and transparent for
Kind of
the
like,
American
remember,
people.
People old enough to
And
remember,
Mr.
like,
Speaker,
I want to
yield
be
back.
like Mike. I want to be like Michael Jordan.
I thank
want
the
to be like
gentleman
a
for
Russian
yielding
bot.
back.
That'd be
I thank
cool.
him for his service on the Judiciary Committee. Mr. Speaker, this time I would yield such time as he may consume to another of my colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold.
I'd like to thank the gentleman from Florida. He has definitely been a leader on this issue. And I've got to tell you, I too am happy the Intelligence Committee has agreed to release the memo. When I was back home in Texas last week, it was the #1 issue people were talking to me about. And I want to take a minute and step back and do a little bit of a history lesson. The Fourth Amendment to our Constitution arose from some of the abusive practices that were going on in the colonies. The King of England would send his troops to rifle through people's effects without a warrant. And our Fourth Amendment said, we're not going to let that happen in these new United States of America. We're going to require the government to get a warrant before they go through people's papers. And we're protected from illegal searches. And I've been worried since the first day I got here in Congress that in our effort to protect ourselves, and perhaps out of fear, some of it perhaps warranted, we're eroding those rights. So as this memo comes out, regardless of what's in it, we need to be looking at the process. how we went to a secret court to get permission to get this information, how that information was gathered, what that information was, who vetted it, how thoroughly it was vetted, and how the judges reacted, and eventually what came out and determined whether we need to reform that process to protect Americans' right. Yes, we all have a right to know what is going on with our government. Yes, I'm worried about career bureaucrats or elected officials abusing the power of the government to get information on their political enemies, like the king was doing back in the days of the Revolutionary War. So this is our opportunity to make sure that that doesn't happen in these United States. Let's not lose sight of what the issue is here, and that is protecting the American people, not only from foreigners who look to do us harm, but also from an oppressive government who abuses their power to spy on American citizens. So I'm glad this memo is going to come out. I urge President Trump to promptly release it. And in fact, to go beyond that, look at some of the sources of the material in that. Determine that we can reveal some of those sources without jeopardizing our ability to gather intelligence, and release the source materials so we know what people knew when they made the decision to pursue the material covered in this memo. I think this is a great time for this country. I think this is our opportunity to remind ourselves that we do have a right to be safe and secure in our persons and papers from a government that may be trying to do more than protect us. You know, maybe some of these folks in the government have shifted from, well, we need to protect America, to, well, the best way to protect America is to protect ourselves and our job and our political agenda. That's not what the job of our law enforcement and intelligence community is. It's to protect us from those who want to do us harm, especially foreigners. And I want to give them the power to do that and the ability to do that, but I do not want to give them the ability to affect elections, to go after their political enemies, to spy on any one of us, because they can. That if we give the government too much power, there are those who will abuse it. So we in Congress have got to keep our eye on the ball at all times and protect the constitutional rights that our forefathers and our founding fathers gave us, and that our men and women in uniform fight for every day that they're in service to this country. With that, sir, I yield.
I thank the gentleman for Texas for yielding back, and at this time, I would like to yield such time as he may consume to a fellow member of the Judiciary Committee, another of the first members of Congress to demand the appointment of a second special counsel to look into matters such as this, the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King.
I thank the gentleman from Florida for yielding to me, and I very much appreciate the gentleman, Mr. Gates, from taking the lead on this issue back some weeks or months ago to bring a resolution to the House Judiciary Committee to call for a special counsel to more broadly investigate all the difficulties that have been taking place in this country, driven by political partisanship on the other side of the aisle. And, Mr. Speaker, I look back and I think about what the attitude was of President Trump, actually even before the election and shortly after, when I listened to him and he more or less expressed this sentiment, which was that with Hillary Clinton and her transgressions and the way she had handled the classified material and up to the secret server next to the bathroom up in New York in her place, essentially the president's position was, we need to move America forward. We should not be dug deeply into going backwards on this or looking back over our shoulder. Let's move forward. The public has litigated this in the election. Now, I think that's where the president wanted it to be, where President Trump wanted it to be. But it wasn't to be because the left could not accept the idea that the American people had spoken. And so they began to manufacture and continue the manufacture of this
they probably could have
Russian
had some deals and just
investigation,
walked
this
away.
allegations
They
that were
relinquish their power.
Collusion allegations with the Russians to try to manipulate an American election. I don't think anybody doubts that the Russians made some effort at that. But all of us doubt that they had any impact whatsoever on our election. And those of us, at least on this side of the aisle, have seen zero information and zero evidence that the campaign of President Trump had any kind of relationship that went on with the Russians that promoted it or colluded in any way. But because there needed to be some explanation for this phenomenal presidential election of Donald Trump, we had to be drugged back into this Russian investigation over and over again. Now, this began within 2 weeks of the president's election, after that about November 8th or so. And then
Just give me 1 second here. Give me one cotton picking second. I mean, seriously, we needed a reason. They needed a reason. You kidding me? They needed a reason. I mean, what do you have to search for? I mean, here you go. Here you go. They needed an excuse. They needed an excuse why this half-dead woman lost. She just popped right back up there, didn't she?
Arkansas to represent inmates. Excuse me.
Just one moment, yeah. Pardon me, just a minute.
Too much to say.
And just a moment. Let me get a lozenge. Hold on. That's better.
That's been that's been part of my mission. Representing poor people through the Legal Services Corporation. It's about making people's lives better. If you work at it, you stick with it, you can make a difference.
You just keep on going there. Woo, yeah. Is that they're applauding? I think she finished the fucking sentence finally.
Intriguing that this activity has happened around the time Trump became the nominee. And look, he very early on allied himself with Putin's policies. I mean, to pull out of NATO, for goodness sakes, right?
Yeah, and we pulled out of NATO.
Furthermore, has praised Putin. He seems to have this bizarre attraction to dictators, including Putin. He won't tell us where he owes $650 million. There's a lot of rumors about that. And
evidence or proof or just rumors?
Made it clear that
like you're clearing
your throat?
He doesn't
particularly care whether Putin and the intelligence services attack American institutions. So, get some water. Yep. Thank you. Thanks.
No, we're more concerned with our own intelligence services attacking American institutions. I'm not nearly as concerned with the Russian intelligence servers intelligence services attacking our institutions as I am our own intelligence servers attacking us. See these people, it's all distraction with them. Hey, ooh, Russia's the boogeyman. Did you check under your bed for Russians? Is this like looking for Martians?
Well, that was. We've got Dan Pfeiffer. He's a former senior advisor to President Obama. He's tweeting, quote, he's going to be really curious to see whether NBC tries to justify this blank or just does the right thing and apologizes for covering this. We've got really Clinton traveling press secretary Nick Merrill, Rick, he's tweeting to NBC, get a life. But you know, new video shows that shows an interesting history of these coughing, the coughing spells. Watch this. Take a listen.
Here, David, you talk. To represent inmates. Excuse me.
New York.
Excuse me.
New York.
Sorry. It's okay.
California.
That's water.
In an airplane flying over Wisconsin and not stopping.
All right, but the Clinton campaign is trying to make like the health of a
we could
possible
stop
future
in Milwaukee
president
enough,
should
keep
be off
going.
limits. What do you make of that?
About health care, we need to make
What about
Madison?
Nope.
Really
Keep on
well
going.
and improve it and get the costs out of an upward spiral of.
That's how dumb she is. No, they'll just fly back and forth from California to New York. But man, what about Wisconsin? No, California, New York. This is a democracy. We'll just get California and New York. You go for that. You see how the democracy works out for you there. Well, I won the popular vote. Okay, congratulations. You lost too many fucking states, bitch.
An upward spiral.
To send Catherine Cortez Masto to the United States Senate.
You're okay. No, she's not okay. She's the furthest thing from okay.
Okay, here we are.
You're not going anywhere. We're going to stay right here. Here we are. Here we are.
Okay, we'll keep talking, and apparently these people are here to protest Trump because Trump and his kids have killed a lot of animals. So thank you for making that point.
I'm trying to end the campaign focusing on issues that are really close to my heart, and this is one of them.
Hold on, just let me get another lozenge here. Be right back. I just got to go out to my car and get some cough drops.
You know, for me, service is really all about fulfilling the instruction of my Methodist faith. And you can see part of the creed I like to follow behind me. Do all the good you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can.
I believe you can, Toucan Sam. I believe you can.
Now.
Woo! Man, that was inspiring. Anyway, just a little taste of one of the many reasons that, you know, we don't need an excuse, or the Democrats didn't need an excuse as to why she lost.
As that unfolded, Mr. Speaker, then we saw what was really going on here, and we got into about February or March of last year. And at that point, I said, they're not going to relent on this Russian investigation business. They're going to continue to belabor this point. The election has already been settled, and it's not in question as far as the results of the polls are concerned. And so we have a president. Let's honor the president. Let's honor the will of the American people. Let's respect the decision made in the polls. But instead, the pressure continued on and on. Allegations complicit with the mainstream media, the fake news, as we've now finally come to know them, I think, by habit and fact. And at that point, I said,
exactly.
If they will not let up,
not just because the president said so.
If they will not let up, then it's going to be an obligation to dig and drill deeply into all of the things that bring this together, from Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner, all the way across the board, from Hillary and the sham investigation and questioning of her on July 2nd, 2016, and on throughout the whole spectrum of things. And so, Mr. Speaker, if I'm important for me to yield, I'd be happy to do so, if that's in the timing of the protocol.
The gentleman from Florida would have to yield.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll certainly yield to the chair for the purposes of an announcement.
Thank you. The gentleman will suspend. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has agreed to House Comrades 101, providing a joint session of Congress to receive a message from the President.
Thank you. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while we're very excited about receiving the message from the President tomorrow evening, I am excited currently to continue receiving the message from the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. King, and so I will yield to him such time as he may consume.
I thank the gentleman from Florida for continuing to yield and picking up where I left off. So it became an obligation to drill to the complete bottom of all of the allegations that had been made from the investigation that surely didn't look legitimate to us, as Mr. Gates and I and others on the Judiciary Committee began to question the people from the FBI and the people from the Justice Department. And at that time, James Comey, the director of the FBI, and we put those pieces together. Each one of those little incidents that were testified to kind of stood up okay on their own. But when you put them together in the string of, it had to be an unbelievable string of coincidences that were presented before the Judiciary Committee and the other committees here on the Hill. And it became clear to us, initiated by Mr. Gates, that we need to go much more deeply into this and much more quickly. And so a good number of us supported a resolution to call for a special counsel. Now, I support the idea of an additional special counsel to broaden this, and I would write the language even more broadly than the original resolution. But we should keep in mind what's going on this Hill today, and that is that there are, by my count at least, 7 different congressional committees that are investigating this broad picture of the subject matter that we're discussing here today. 7 different ones. And on top of that, we've got Robert Mueller's investigation as a special counsel. And additionally, we've got an IG investigation going on in the Justice Department under Michael Horowitz. Now, Michael Horowitz has a good reputation, and he has about 450 investigators altogether, all of whom are probably not working on this. I'd be surprised if they were. But these reports, so 7 reports from committees that eventually will come out, Mr. Speaker, and 1 from Robert Mueller that's going to come out, and 1 from the IG that's going to come out. Now, this is pretty confusing to try to understand the subject matter that they're addressing. It's a little bit different, defined a little bit different from committee to committee, and from the assigned investigation groups to assigned investigation groups. But I'll envision this. Our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, sits there in the Justice Department having, in an honorable way, recused himself from the Russian investigation, which keeps his hands off of that. The recommendation, as I understand that, came from Rod Rosenstein, the acting, or as I'll say, the acting U.S. Attorney General in the event that Jeff Sessions isn't there to be the Attorney General. That was his recommendation by the testimony that I believe I remember, that Jeff Sessions should recuse himself from the Russian investigation. And that's the man who made the appointment of Robert Mueller. And so when I look at this whole picture, our Attorney General's job is a tough one, but it's one I think he can do better than anyone else in this country or on this planet. And that is make sense of all of these investigations. 7 congressional investigations, an IG investigation, and a special counsel's investigation. That adds up to 9 by my estimation. Now, people are human. And so that says to me that these assignments of these investigations are either going to overlap or they're going to be gaps. And when you've got 9 of them all together, there'll be overlapping and there will be gaps. And where there are overlaps, there's likely to be some contradictions. And so the job of the Attorney General is look at this whole picture and put this back together in a way that you can figure out what the contradictions are, fill in the gaps, and investigate the places where that haven't been investigated by the assignments of these various committees and the special counsel. And then deliver the American people the right kind of view on the justice that needs to come. The justice that needs to come, if there are indictments, to make that call for those indictments clearly and unequivocally based upon factual evidence. That's why I support this memo being released and the vote of the Select Committee on Intel today, because it's essential that the American people get to the truth, and they can't absorb this truth all in one day. It's got to come out a piece at a time, because we're human, they're human.
And that what Q's
and
been
so
telling us.
I encourage the Attorney General to keep his hand on this in a steady way that he has. I'm very confident that the decisions made on the Select Committee and Intel are the correct ones, and I'm very confident the President will make a decision to release the memo so the American people can get at the truth. And how far the truth takes us, history will write that book.
Exactly.
And I thank the gentleman for putting this all together here this evening, and I would yield back to the gentleman from Florida.
We're going to stop there for tonight, but you guys are welcome to go to cspan.org, and it's pretty easy. You go to cspan.org, you go right over to Congress right here. You can pick whether you want to watch stuff from the House or the Senate, and you just scroll right to what you want. They make it really easy for you. Really easy. Oh, here, what did Shift for Brains say? You better check that out. You better check this out real quick.
Good evening. I want to give a quick briefing on the events in the committee this evening. I think we have crossed a deeply regrettable line in this committee where, for the first time in the 10 years or so that I've been on the committee, there was a vote to politicize the declassification process of intelligence and potentially compromise sources and methods.
Politicizing.
I made a couple motions this afternoon or this evening.
They're not worried about
first, we scheduled the hearing today or the business meeting so that the minority memoranda could be made available to the members of the House that had been misled by the majority's memoranda. We expected that vote to be non-controversial, and it was. The House members will now have access to the minority memoranda. I made a secondary motion that prior to the public release of either memoranda, that the FBI and the Department of Justice have the opportunity to come to our House in a classified session on both memoranda, on the underlying facts and the underlying materials, so that the committee could make a responsible judgment as to whether the memoranda should be made public. That motion was voted down by the majority. The majority expressed a concern that something in the minority memoranda or otherwise could compromise. For that reason, we asked that both memoranda be vetted by the FBI and the Department of Justice. But that vote was voted down. I spoke with the director of the FBI earlier this afternoon. He expressed a strong interest in being able to brief our committee prior to any release of these materials about concerns that the Bureau and the Department have. I relayed that interest by the director of the FBI, a appointee of President Trump, to this committee, but that was unavailing. They were not willing to meet with the director of the FBI to hear the Bureau's concerns or the Department's concerns. Instead, they voted against allowing their own members, as well as the members of the broader House of Representatives, to be briefed by the Department of Justice and FBI on these memoranda. Finally, I moved that if the majority was going to release their memoranda publicly, that they release the minority views as well, that they be released jointly. And the majority, on a party line basis, voted against both memoranda being released to the public. They then took up their own memoranda and voted it out to make public. We had a separate vote on the minority memoranda, and the majority voted against allowing the public to see the minority memoranda. The release the memo crowd apparently doesn't want to release the memo now. The most they would do is say that at some indeterminate point, a week or so from now, they would consider whether to release the minority memo. We raised, of course, the transparently political objective behind this, which is to allow the majority to set a certain narrative for a week or so before they released a full statement of the facts from the minority. But nonetheless, this is where we are. We had votes today to politicize the intelligence process, to prohibit the FBI and the Department of Justice from expressing their concerns to our committee and to the House, and to selectively release to the public only the majority's distorted memo without the full facts.
How do we prohibit that?
A very sad day, I think, in the history of this committee.
The Americans are. It is sad that we're going to find out that so many people that have been elected
during this
and
hearing,
appointed to positions have been so
sadly, we can fully expect
corrupt.
that the President of the United States will not put the national interest over his own personal interest.
Us having a government that
but
allows
it is a
us
sad
to know
day
this information
indeed
is
when
not
that is
sad.
also true of our own
That's
committee.
The victory.
Because today this committee voted to put the President's personal interest, perhaps their own political interest, above the national interest, in denying themselves even the ability to hear from the Department and the FBI. And that is, I think, a deeply regrettable state of affairs.
You are a deeply regrettable state of affairs, Schiff. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. As always, God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And for God's sakes, home, piggy, home. Tonight's broadcast is also brought to you by Carl's Jr. Fuck you, I'm eating.
Across the weary room, please look, and I was on the road to ruin. Music played as we were without end. No hint, no word, no honor to defend. Always put to the test, then drowned in desire, our souls on fire. I led the way to the pure pie, out of form, and the consequence gave into decadence. One slip down the hole we fall. the idea of being in love? Or was it the hand of fate that seemed to fit just like a glove? Moments slipped by and soon the seas were sold. It grew late, neither one wanted to remain alone. One slip down the hole we fall. Seems to say no time at all. I'm only two lives of reason, lines of life to life. One regret you will never forget. There'll be no sleep in the night. One step down the hole we fall. Seems to take no time at all. I'm only two lives of reason, lines of life to life. One regret you will never forget.